Hello there. A couple of months ago, I decided to go and buy the Bo Burnham vinyl record for myself. I enjoy listening to vinyls on my free time, and I've started a little mini collection, so I thought, this would be nice to add. Unfortunately, when they arrived, both records were warped and had scratches on them, making them ill-listenable. They just were skipping too much, and I could not enjoy them. Thankfully, I was able to get a replacement sent to me, and now they are working and perfect for the collection. However, since I got the replacement, now I've got 2 records that I don't know what to do with. Fast forward to the announcement of Mythicon. When they announced Mythicon, one thing I absolutely fell in love with was the promotional art. I love this artwork. Whoever designed it deserves huge kudos. It is an homage to the original Rhett and Link logo. You got the feel of being at a carnival or a state fair. It is phenomenal. I absolutely love it. And as I was looking at it, and specifically looking at the rings on the outside, I was like, this kind of looks like a commemorative coin or a vinyl record or... And that's when genius struck. I thought, what if I take this art and this record and morph them together into one beautiful masterpiece? And so, here we are. We're going to unsheath our 2 records here, and then we're going to pick between the 2 of them the one that is the least messed up for us to use. I later also decided to cut up the album covers so that way I can make a nice little placemat to put on there. That way I don't get paint or cut up this beautiful card table that I'm using as my workspace. Sorry if it's a little unprofessional looking. I'm working with what I got. So we're going to go and just cut open this album and put down our placemat. And then we're going to go in with that white acrylic paint. We're just going to take our paintbrush there and slather it on. This definitely took longer than I would have liked because I was using just basic acrylic paint. Ideally, you would probably want to use a gesso or some sort of primer paint designed to be a base coat. Using just this white acrylic paint, it took me about 4 to 5 layers for it to get completely solid white. Although it did leave some striations and some texture because of the brush and the paint. So it added more texture than I would like, but it's what we're working with. I would like to note that the brush I am using came from a multi-pack of kids' craft brushes. It was $5 for all of them, which I think, that's a pretty good bargain. However, which you're about to see, it kind of led to some problems in the painting process.
Yeah. Don't pay attention to that.
This brush kept falling apart on me. I had to keep pulling out these little plastic blue bristles from the painting, and I would constantly end up messing up the last coat I did and have to go over and repaint it. But, we work with what we got, especially when you're poor.
Oh God, this paintbrush is really falling apart. It's fine. We're still good. Oh God, no, it's fine. We're still good. You just repaint over it, no one's gotta know. That's how we roll.
Despite all the challenges with the brush, I was able to get a nice base of white, and now my record is ready to be worked on. I make sure to print out a reference of the Mythicon artwork, just to make sure that the details that I want to add are, done as accurately as I can do. So I'm going to just take a pencil and I'm going to start by sketching out the outer ring in the design. Now looking back, for all the rings on this, I probably should have used a compass or probably found some bowls that I could have traced around, because as you can see, I'm doing freehand and the lines end up being, a little shaky and not as symmetrical later on, which, personally kind of bugs me, but I don't know, some of you might not care, but personally, I am quite the perfectionist, and I would have preferred a little more even lines, but too bad, it's already done. We can't change it. This is what we're working with. I just gotta tell myself that it adds character. It makes it more personal when I do it freehand, so that's what I'm going to tell myself. Learning from my freehand mistake on the ring, I decide to print out another version of the logo so I can trace it. I want to make sure that, if anything, I do not mess up my guys' face and hair. You know, because if I'm going to be hanging this up and looking at it for a long time, I want to make sure that when I look at it, I'm like, oh, look, it's my boys, Rhett and Link. There they are, looking good. I don't want it to look like I ran their faces through a Play-Doh fun factory, you know? That is why I am taking the time to make sure I cut out their faces properly, and I'm going to layer them and tape them so I have a perfect looking image to trace. Now that I got it all cut out, I'm just going to take a little bit of clear tape, slap it on there to make sure my boys don't fall apart when I put them on there to trace. Alright, now since Rhett's hair has a lot of little curls and loops, I do have to go in with an X-Acto knife to make sure I cut those out. I could have probably just left it and eyeballed those little sections, but I was feeling extra perfectionist, and you know, I had already committed to doing it, so we're going to take the time and carefully cut out those little sections. It's very important that when you use an X-Acto knife that you do put down some sort of protection, otherwise you will just cut up your table. And thankfully the album cover for the vinyls was thick enough that when I would cut through the cardstock paper, it wouldn't cut through the table and only a little bit of indentation into that mat. So that ended up working out really well for me. Now, let me just say this. I love Rhett, and I love his long hair. It's a good look. I think he should keep rocking it. But when you have to take the time to tediously cut out every single little curl of hair, it can get to you a little.
Oh man, Rhett, you and your damn hair. Why is it gotta be so wavy and luxurious?
I will say that this was indeed the most tedious part of this project. I tend to be a little heavy-handed when it comes to drawing or using X-Acto knives, so my hands were definitely a little cramped, a little sore, and it was only adding to the tension. But thankfully, we managed to get through it and have a nice, perfect little cutout for the record. Now that that's properly cut out, we are ready to slap it onto the record. I make sure to position it in a place where it's fairly centered in that ring, but also not lining up in an awkward way with the center hole. I didn't want it to be in a weird place, so I tried to find the best place to put it. Now that we got that secured on there with some tape, we're just going to carefully trace all the edges. And of course, going over Link's side was perfect, just nice and easy, smooth lines. But then, you know, you get to Rhett's hair and it's just doing the dance around the hair. Just every little curl, every little flip. I mean, don't get me wrong, it ends up looking pretty good at the end, and overall I think the hair wisping in the wind really adds to the design, but still, it was a little time consuming. I mean, the whole project was time consuming, but it was just a little much. Alright, now that we got that outline done, we can just carefully peel it off. You do want to be careful, you don't want to take too much white with you with the tape. And then look at that, we got our outline. Now that we got the main trace done, I'm going to go back to the cutout I made and just cut around their hairline. Like I said before, I don't want to do my boys wrong, so making sure their hair looks good is very important. So I'm going to go back in with my scissors and then again with the X-Acto knife for Rhett's hair to make sure everything is perfectly cut out. I also take one of the stars from my printout and cut that out to trace around the edge of my record. Now in the original design, the stars do get smaller in size as they get close to the bottom, but I just did not want to take the time to do that, and I was worried about them becoming too asymmetrical. So I thought, might as well just take one size and trace that around evenly. I think it ends up looking good, but, you know, some of you may think I'm half-assing it, and to all those people, I don't like you. That was very mean. Go home. Don't be so mean. Just try to have a good time. Now I'm going to go back in with some freehand to get those two inner rings. Again, I do wish I was a little more perfectionist with those rings, but if you don't stare at them too hard, I think they look fine. I just tried to get that first line as close to the bottom of the stars evenly, and then I had to just eyeball the distance for the rest of them. I was initially with pencil going to go in and add those little squiggly in-between lines, but I decided I might as well just wait and I can throw those in when I do the final black outline of everything. With all the background done, we're going to go back and trace in their hair. I just slap on a little bit of tape and carefully line up each of those little wavy curls to make sure it's properly placed on their face. And then again, with our pencil, just going to trace that entire outline. Having a trace out like this is also going to make the painting process a lot easier, so I can just go in and paint the sections each and not have to worry about repainting over too many areas, which I end up having to do anyway later, but that's for later. I go back to those cutouts and I do the same thing for Rhett's beard along with the top of the tent and their shirts. I go in and I place those and carefully trace the lines again. I also go back to the beard and tent cutout to cut out Rhett's mouth area along with the edge of their shirt to really make sure I know where the top of the tent is and to know where, Rhett's mouth begins and his beard ends. I also decide I want to make sure Link's ear is correct, so I take his cutout and I trace around the edge of his ear. And because I went and did all that hard work for Rhett's hair and beard, I think I gotta give Link the same treatment, so I go and cut out his glasses, place those, and get those traced out. I mean, if I messed up his glasses, that's just as bad as messing up Rhett's beard. At least in my book, you can't do that. I can't do that to my boys, so tracing the glasses it is. I probably could have done it freehand, but, I'm all about fair treatment. Alright, now it's finally time to add in some color. We're going to start by adding a little splash of color to the background. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of orange and a little bit of light blue. And I'm going to take this little sponge tool and just going to lightly sponge the color around the stars in the background of this. I want it just to look like, a little splashing of kind of watercolor-esque colors. So we're just kind of sponging it in carefully. Unfortunately, I did lose some footage of me adding in the blue, but I add a little bit of blue to the center and to that outer ring as well, which is why it kind of mixed together to add a bit more of a green color. Now, I realized that those colors were a little too bright and too intense, and it looked a little too sloppy to me. So with that same sponge tool, I'm just going to go over everything with white, just to mute down the colors and kind of blend everything better together. I think it helped out a lot, and I like how it looks better with the white added. Alright, now it's time to give my boys the gift of flesh. I mix up a nice little skin tone and just carefully paint that in both of their faces. Now I'm going to take that same skin tone color, mix in a little white, and just add in some highlights in there. They do have these really pretty highlights in the picture, so I wanted to try my best to add in those highlights as well. That way their skin doesn't look too flat and looks a little more three-dimensional and dynamic. Now I'm going to go in with my pencil and add in the detail lines of the collars of their shirt, but more importantly, the lines of the tent. That way I can make sure every panel is correct and of an equal size. In hindsight, I did not need to do the collar of the shirt at all. It's going to get painted right over and you're not going to be able to see it with what I do later, but it was definitely important to do for the tent. Now I got a nice little green here. We're going to go in for the shirt. I am well aware that this green does not match the green of the design, and that was purposeful, because the design reminded me so much of the OG Rhett and Link logo, which, I remember from back in the day. So to make an homage to that more directly, I decided I'm going to paint the green of their shirts to match the green of the logo more than the green of the shirt in this picture. And I am pretty pleased with how it came out. I don't think it ruins the design at all. In fact, I think it makes it a little more personal for me. Alright, now we're just going to go in with a little bit of a yellow and a red and paint in those sections of the tent. I did start with an average size brush like before, but I did have to go in with a fine tip brush for these panels because when you get to the tip of the tent, it gets really skinny up there, and I really wanted to make sure that this looked good. So, fine tip it is for some nice fine lines. Alright, now we're going to take that fine tip brush and we're going to paint in that beautiful halo around my boys. That's what I like to think of the ring around them. It's a halo because they are so angelic. They are gods among men. I'm sorry. But yeah, we're just going to take that brush and paint right over those lines and, freehand over freehand, it works fine. It looks good. It gets the job done. Again, I would say that the lines, these rings, are my least favorite part of the whole project, but I am a stickler for perfection, so I'm just looking at that and being like, oh god, they're so wonky, but hopefully you won't mind, although I just, drew your attention to it, so maybe now you do mind, but that's besides the point. Alright, now it is time to paint in their beautiful head of hair. I'm going to start with Link's hair, since his is going to be a little easier to paint. I mix up this beautiful shade of gray for him, and I just paint in all his hair right up to about the center. I am going to go back and blend in both shades of their hair, that way it looks like they kind of morph together into one cohesive hairstyle. So I'm now taking this light brown and I'm going to go and paint Rhett's hair. Again, Rhett's hair was definitely more challenging because it was mainly all using the fine tip. I really wanted to make sure all of those strands were identifiable, clear to see, and just right there flowing in the wind. So, fine tip brush again. Later for Rhett's beard, I did try to mix up a different shade of brown so that way they wouldn't mix in with the wispy hairs next to his beard, but they kind of end up looking the same, but it's not that big of a deal since in the end I am going to go back with some black and outline everything. I have to say though, the blend job I do in the middle of their hair, I love it. I'm very happy with how that came out. Just a very beautiful blend of the gray and the brown. I love it. Overall, I think the hair came out looking pretty dang good. And of course later I am going to go back with some details, but right now it's just base color. Now I'm going to go in and paint Link's glasses. Now on the original Mythicon art design, it is a lightish black gray with a print on it. However, I don't have the skill or time to really do that, so I'm just going to go in and color them the way Link's typical glasses are, where the bottoms are brown and they fade up to a more darker brown black. And now, for me, the most important step, drawing the face details. For me, if I mess this up, I just don't think I can forgive myself because it's their faces. So I go in with my pencil and I start by just sketching out everything. Their eyebrows, eyes, details of the nose, and lips. Just really doing my best to take my time, make sure all the shapes look accurate, and ready to go in for color. Okay, so new camera because it turns out phones don't have a lot of space for video, so sorry about that. You didn't miss too much. After I did the sketching with the pencil, I went in with some watercolor pencil to add a little bit of color to shape it out. I will say Rhett's brows are looking a little dark and Link's lips are looking a little thick, but, it's alright. It looks like them. You can tell it's them. Besides, I'm going to fix it up a little bit with this final touch-up of paint. Alright, so now I'm going to start off by dry brushing a little bit of white into Link's hair. I love how this came out with the details, just brushing in these little swirls of white to really add to the hair. Initially I was going to add more fine lines in the hair like in the print, but I ended up just really liking the way the hair is kind of blendy and soft like this, so I just kept it with the dry brush color there. I also tried to do the same with Rhett's hair, mixing up a lighter brown to mix in with the hair and dry brushing over that to add a little bit of texture. Now I'm mixing up a nice little color here for the lips to go over that, so it's just a nice soft pink for the lips. I still think Link's lips ended up a little juicier than I was intending, but you know what? It's fine, It just seems like a natural thing us artists want to do with him. Alright, now I'm taking that fine tip brush and carefully adding in the green and blue irises for them. And I also mix up a light gray color for Link's glasses there. And then one of the last big paint things I'm going to do for this step is I'm going to paint in each of those stars with a bluish gray. And later I am going to add in the black detailing all at once when I do all the outlining for this. It was at this stage when I was adding the stars in that I was really starting to like how this was coming together. It looked just like a painted commemorative coin. It was just really looking good, and I was starting to feel really confident in what I did. Hopefully people won't, be upset that I used a lot of tracing to get the shapes right, but I think it was a very necessary step, and I feel like this would have come out way worse if I hadn't done that, so don't get mad. Be happy. And that's pretty much it for the base colors there. Now, I was originally going to paint in all those flowers coming out the top of the tent, but I just did not feel like doing that, to be honest. It was a lot more fine tip, sketching out all those flowers. I just didn't feel like doing it, so instead I decided to place the Mythicon logo right in the center there. I also was debating on just keeping it, blank like that, leaving it how it is, but I don't know, I can't look at that middle section of their necks like that. Like, if you look at them with something in the middle or just look at the whole, it's like, oh, this is, a cool image, but I don't know, something about seeing two sides of a neck morph together like that, I don't know, it makes me uncomfy. Makes me uncomfy. So instead I decide, do what I did before with the boys, and I printed out the Mythicon logo, and I cut it out carefully to make sure I could properly get the size and shape right. So we're just going in again with the X-Acto knife to get in all those little itty bitty pieces, and again we're going to place it in about the center and trace it around. Now that we got that all outlined, before going in with the base red color, I wanted it to look like the text was kind of floating or a little more dimensional. So I just sponge in some black around that outline to make it look like there's a bit of a shadow. Now that that shadow is in, it's time to go in with our bright red and paint in that Mythicon text. Now ideally, I should have done this step much earlier before adding in the rest of the paint, because it took about 3 or 4 layers of paint to get a nice solid red. But if I had added it in before with the rest of the tracing step, I probably could have gotten it done with 2 coats like most everything before. But whoops, you live and you learn. Now that we got our solid red outline, it's time to go in with the yellow inside text. Now, I did initially cut it out to try and do tracing before, but I was having way too much trouble trying to get it placed exactly right. So instead, I decided to go in freehand and using that stencil as a reference to get the proper shape of the yellow text. Now, I will say that if I have a reference, I can do pretty good mimicking some basic shapes of stuff, but it definitely is not exact, it's not perfect, but when you look at it as a whole, I think, oh, you can tell what it is, it's good enough, and again, this is just a fun craft project, so it's good enough for me. And of course, once again, now that that outline is done, it's time to go in with that yellow paint. And again, this took a lot of coats because we're painting over red. But, we just take our time, we take our fine tip brush, and we just paint away. And we are done with the paint phase. Look at that. I could have just left it here. Honestly, it doesn't look too bad. But I really did want to add an outline to define all the different shapes and make them stand out. I should have used like a fine tip paintbrush for the outline, but the one I had just wasn't fine enough for the lines I wanted. I would have used a fine tip Sharpie, but I didn't have one, so being the resourceful guy I am, I just took a black ballpoint pen and carefully traced around all the lines. I'm also going in and adding the details to the stars as well. Definitely up close you can tell that it's a pen, it's got kind of that scratchy line look, but I personally have never disliked that look. I've always enjoyed the look of artwork that kind of has a sketch quality to it. And because I was kind of doing the watercolor background, I felt like, doing the sketching kind of look would, make it feel more like an art crafty project. So, yeah. Is that convincing? Do you sound convinced? It's definitely not exactly how I would have liked to have outlined the black, but, when I finish it, it honestly doesn't look too bad. My biggest concern was when I was going to do the sealant at the end that it was going to make the ink bleed, since, it definitely works a little differently on here since it's acrylic and not just on the piece of paper. But when I get to the sealant phase, you'll see that was not really a problem. So in the end, I do not super regret the pen thing, but I just feel kind of silly using a ballpoint pen on this. That's just me. And there we go. Look at that. I will say the little squiggly lines on that inner ring are not my favorite, but it's a little background detail. I don't think it's that bad. It works for what it is. But yeah, now that we're about to be done, we just gotta put on some matte Mod Podge to seal it in. That way, if it falls off my wall or I do anything stupid, it won't get damaged. Alright, now here is the before. This is just the plain old scratched up record. Unfortunate that it couldn't play, but now it has been reborn. Here it is, the new Mythicon inspired vinyl record. I gotta say, I'm really proud with how this came out. I took a couple cheats here and there, had to be resourceful a couple times and make some last minute changes. But overall, I think it looks really good, and it is definitely worth being on my wall of mythicality. There it is. Home sweet home. But anyway, that's it, guys. Hope you guys have a great rest of your week, and stay awesome, my dudes.